You know that smell? Popcorn, a little bit of grease, and that tinny carousel music drifting on the air? For as long as I can remember, that was the smell of summer. In my town, summer didn't really start until the Starlight Carnival's fleet of beat-up trucks rumbled down Main Street, their sides painted with faded clowns and blurry thrill rides. It was pure magic. A city of light and laughter that would just pop up in Miller's Field every July, stay for a week, and then vanish, leaving nothing behind but flat grass and memories. And for me, those memories were everything. I remember my dad winning me this cheap, oversized teddy bear at the ring toss. Its seams were already splitting. I remember the dizzying height of the Ferris wheel, looking down at my whole world laid out in blinking lights. My first taste of cotton candy, this sticky cloud that just dissolved on my tongue. It felt like I was eating a piece of the sunset. The carnival wasn't just some event. It was a part of my childhood. As I got older, the magic didn't fade. It just changed. I got fascinated by the other side of it all. The setup, the teardown, the quiet hum of the generators after everyone went home. The lives of the carnies who looked like they had 1,000 miles of road in their eyes. The carnival became this living, breathing creature to me, one that only showed its real face after dark. So, when I saw the handwritten "Help Wanted" sign tacked to a telephone pole last year, my heart just about stopped. They needed a night guard. It felt less like a job and more like being handed the key to a secret kingdom. I could already picture myself walking through the silent midways, the sole guardian of the sleeping rides, the keeper of all that magic. The interview was just a phone call with a guy whose voice sounded like gravel rolling around in a tin can. He said his name was Silas, the park manager. He didn't ask about experience, no references. He just asked if I was afraid of the dark. I laughed and said no. He asked if I could follow instructions to the letter, no matter how weird they seemed. Thinking about, safety rules and liability stuff, I confidently said yes. Good, he grunted. The rules are strict. Be at the main gate at 10:30 p.m. Don't be late. That was it. I was in. I spent the rest of the day buzzing like a little kid. It was a dream come true. Or so I thought. That night, I met Silas in person. He was this stooped, skeletal man with a face like a road map of every back road in the country, looking as old and worn as the peeling paint on the funhouse. He didn't give me a tour or walk me through my duties. He just handed me a heavy-duty flashlight with a beam that seemed suspiciously weak, a ring of old brass keys, and a single, laminated piece of paper. "Your life depends on this," he said, his voice totally flat. "Memorize it. Live by it. Your shift ends when I get here at 6:30 a.m. Don't lose the keys." I took the paper. The laminate was thick, worn smooth at the edges. At the top, in stark block letters, it just said, "The rules." I smiled, thinking it was some quirky carny tradition, a gag for the new guy. Then I started to read. And by the time my eyes hit the last rule, the happy carnival music still echoing in my head from earlier just faded away, replaced by this cold, creeping silence. I just stood there under the single dim bulb over the ticket booth. The keys in my pocket suddenly felt like they weighed a ton. The list wasn't even long. Just 8 rules. 8 simple-sounding rules that, together, painted a picture I didn't understand and definitely didn't like. I read them again, my flashlight beam shaking a little. Rule 1. All gates must be locked by 11 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. Recheck the lock on the service gate twice. Seemed normal. Standard security stuff. I could do that. Rule 2. Conduct patrols at the top of every hour. The route is marked by faint green arrows painted on the asphalt. Never deviate from this path. It is the safest way through. A bit rigid, but fine. A set path made sense. No wandering off and tripping over a power cable in the dark. Rule 3. If you see a single red balloon floating against the wind, ignore it. Do not follow it. Do not acknowledge its presence. It is not for you. And that's where things got weird. A balloon floating against the wind? How? And why on earth would I want to follow it? The way it was phrased, "it is not for you," sent a shiver right down my spine. Rule 4. The carousel may turn on by itself between midnight and 4 a.m. Do not be alarmed. Let it spin. Do not attempt to shut it down. The music keeps the others happy. The others? What others? I glanced over at the carousel, this huge silhouette of painted horses, totally silent and still. The thought of it just starting on its own, playing that cheerful music to an empty park. It was deeply unsettling. Rule 5. You will find trash and dropped prizes. Clean them up as you go. However, if you find a small porcelain doll with one button eye and a cracked smile, leave it be. Step around it and continue your patrol. It is not lost. Another bizarrely specific thing to just leave alone. I tried to picture it, this little doll on the ground. The detail about the button eye got me. It was too specific to be random. It felt like a warning about something they'd seen before. Rule 6. If you walk past the main tent and hear a voice offering you a front row seat, you must turn to face the entrance and tell a joke. Any joke will do. If you hear laughing, you may go on your way. If the voice says that it wasn't very funny, politely bow and apologize. Your apology must be sincere. I had to read that one 3 times. My brain just couldn't make sense of it. A joke? I was supposed to do stand-up for a ghost in the dark? And if my joke bombed, I had to apologize? It was the most insane thing I'd ever read. My palms were sweating. Rule 7. After 3 a.m., do not look at your own reflection. Not in the funhouse mirrors, not in a puddle of water, not in the glass of a game booth. Avoid your own gaze at all costs. You may not like who looks back. Okay, now this was just psychological. A way to mess with the night guard's head. It had to be. But that line, "you may not like who looks back," felt less like a prank and more like a warning from someone who'd made that mistake. Rule 8. Under no circumstances are you to enter the tunnel of love after midnight. Do not even approach the boarded-up entrance. Some rides are decommissioned for a reason, and that was the last one. Maybe the most direct, just a clear, stay away. I looked toward the back of the park where the old, rotting tunnel of love sat. It hadn't been running in a decade. It was just a dark, forgotten corner of this place I loved. Now, it felt like the most important spot on the map. My head was spinning. This had to be a joke, some elaborate, cruel hazing ritual. Silas was probably watching me from a window somewhere, chuckling. I decided to just play along. It was a dream job, after all. A little weirdness came with the territory, right? 11 p.m. came. I walked the perimeter, the keys clinking. I locked every gate, the clicks echoing in the silence. Like the rule said, I double-checked the service gate. The lock was cold and solid. The park was now a cage, and I was locked inside with this list of insane rules. I went back to the small security office, basically a shack with a chair and a flickering monitor showing static. I just waited for the clock to hit midnight, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The minute hand clicked over. Time for my first patrol. Flashlight in hand, I stepped out onto the midway. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and stale sugar. The vibrant colors of the day were gone, replaced by these huge, looming shapes of black and gray. It was so quiet. My own footsteps sounded like gunshots. I found the first faint green arrow and started to follow my route. The path wound past the game stalls, their prizes all shrouded in darkness. It led me around the scrambler and the tilt-a-whirl, their metal arms looking like sleeping tentacles. Everything was still. silent. I started to feel foolish. My fear was fading, replaced by this feeling of anticlimax. This wasn't so bad, just a quiet, spooky walk. And then I heard it. It started as a low hum, a mechanical groan that vibrated right up through the soles of my shoes. I rounded a corner, and my flashlight beam landed on the carousel. It was moving. Slowly, it began to turn, its painted horses rising and falling. A moment later, the music started. It wasn't the loud, happy music from the daytime. This was a fragile, tinny melody, like it was coming from a broken music box. Notes were missing. The tempo was painfully slow, dragging, almost mournful. It was a funeral dirge for a kid's birthday party. I felt my blood turn to ice. Rule 4. The carousel may turn on by itself. Let it spin. The music keeps the others happy. My first instinct was to run. My second was to find the control box and shut the horrible thing down. But Silas's grim face and that laminated card in my pocket held me there. Let it spin. I stood there for what felt like forever, just mesmerized by the ghastly sight. The empty horses bobbed up and down, their painted smiles mocking me in my shaky flashlight beam. Who were the others? Were they listening? Were they happy? I couldn't stand it. I tore my eyes away and forced my legs to move, sticking to the green arrows. But I couldn't escape the sound. That sad, broken melody followed me through the park, a constant reminder that the rules were real. The joke was over, and the night was just beginning. That hour between midnight and 1 a.m. was the longest of my life. I just sat in the security shack with the door locked, listening to that relentless, warped lullaby from the carousel. It finally ground to a halt around 12:45, and the sudden silence was somehow even worse. Every little creak of wind, every distant rustle was amplified into a threat. I wasn't the confident guy with his dream job anymore. I was a rat in a maze, designed by a madman. When my phone showed 1 a.m., my stomach clenched. I did not want to go back out there. Every part of me was screaming to just stay in that flimsy office until sunrise. But the thought of what might happen if I broke the rules was now scarier than what would happen if I followed them. Rule 2. Conduct patrols at the top of every hour. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and stepped back into the dark. The air felt colder, heavier. My flashlight, which seemed weak before, now felt pathetic. A tiny pinprick of light in an ocean of black. I found the first green arrow and started to walk. The path took me toward the food stalls. That cloying sweetness of spilled soda still hung in the air. I kept my head on a swivel, my flashlight beam darting into the shadows between the booths. And then I saw it. It was bobbing gently about 20 yards ahead, right in the middle of the path. A single, bright red balloon. But it wasn't just hovering, it was moving. Slowly but deliberately into the faint breeze. It was impossible. Rule 3. Ignore it. Do not acknowledge its presence. It is not for you. My feet just stopped. The balloon was mesmerizing. The color was so vibrant against the black and white of the night, like a single drop of blood. I felt this strange, powerful pull towards it. This kid-like urge to understand something that shouldn't exist. It looked lonely. Maybe it was just tied to something I couldn't see. Maybe I should just look. The thought was so inviting. Then the words flashed in my mind. It is not for you. The finality of it was like a splash of ice water. This was a test. I squeezed my eyes shut, forced my head away, and focused on the green arrow at my feet. I took a step, then another. I walked right past it, my gaze fixed on the ground. I could feel it, though. I could feel its presence to my left, like a cold spot in the air, a sense of being watched not by a person, but by the balloon itself. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't dare look back. I just kept walking, my pace getting faster and faster until I was almost jogging down the path. I was breathing heavily when I finally slowed down, my heart hammering. I had passed the test. A small surge of adrenaline went through me. I could do this. I just had to follow the rules. My route curved toward the game booths. My flashlight swept across the ring toss, the basketball hoop, and that's when the beam landed on it. Lying on the asphalt, as if dropped by a child, was a small porcelain doll. Its dress was filthy, its painted face was chipped, but there was no mistaking it. One eye was a glossy, black button. The other socket was empty and dark. A faint, cracked line of red paint formed a grotesque, permanent smile. Rule 5. Leave it be. It is not lost. I froze solid. It was exactly as described. The balloon could have been a trick of the wind, the carousel a mechanical fault. But this? This was proof. The rules were a guide to a world that was fundamentally wrong. The doll looked ancient, evil. The empty socket seemed to stare right through me. The rule said to step around it. I gave it the widest berth I possibly could, practically hugging the side of the test your strength machine as I passed. The air around the doll was freezing cold, a pocket of winter in the humid night. I had this profound sense that I was trespassing, and that this doll wasn't a toy. It was a marker, a warning. By the time I got back to the office, I was trembling. The confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, primal fear. 2 rules, 2 encounters. This wasn't a job. It was a survival gauntlet. And I had 3 hours until sunrise. The worst rules were yet to come. The clock hit 2 a.m. My body protested, but I knew I had no choice. This patrol's route was the one I'd been dreading. It went right through the heart of the park, past the looming main tent. In the day, the main tent was a place of wonder. Tonight, it was a gaping black mouth, its entrance flap stirring slightly in the breeze. I walked slowly, my footsteps unnaturally loud. I kept my flashlight beam low, pointed at the green arrows, trying not to look at the tent. I was halfway past it when a voice spilled out of the darkness inside. "We have a seat saved for you," it said. The voice was smooth, like velvet, calm, inviting, and utterly terrifying. Front row. My heart stopped. Rule 6. It was happening. My mind went completely blank. I couldn't move, turn and face the entrance, tell a joke. With a huge effort, I forced my body to turn. I raised my flashlight, but the beam couldn't penetrate the inky blackness. I was staring into a void. A joke. I needed a joke. My brain was a whirlwind of panic. What was a joke? I couldn't remember a single one. Then, a stupid one my grandpa used to tell popped into my head. "What? What do you call a fish with no eyes?" I stammered, my voice cracking. Silence. A deep, profound silence. My blood pounded in my ears. This was it. I failed. Then, from the void, a sound. Not the laugh I'd hoped for. It was a dry, raspy chuckle, a short guttural sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It was a sound with no humor in it, no joy. But it was, technically, a laugh. I didn't wait. The rule said if I heard laughing, I could go. This was close enough. "Good night," I squeaked, and I turned and walked away as fast as I could without breaking into a full sprint. I didn't look back, just followed the green arrows with a laser focus, the sound of that dry, dead laugh echoing in my mind. Getting back to the shack after the tent felt like reaching a sanctuary. I slammed the door and threw the bolt, my whole body shaking. I looked at my phone. 2:15 a.m. The next patrol at 3 a.m. was when Rule 7 kicked in. Do not look at your own reflection. That hour of waiting was pure torture. I imagined my reflection moving on its own, grinning at me from the dark screen of my phone. I kept my gaze fixed on the floor. The threats outside were real, but Rule 7 hinted at a threat that came from inside you. 3 a.m. Relentless. I forced myself to my feet. This next patrol was the longest, winding through the entire park and past the dreaded funhouse. I stepped outside. The air had changed again. A thin, greasy fog had rolled in, clinging to the ground and muffling all sound. My flashlight beam barely cut through it. I walked with my head down, my eyes glued to the few feet of asphalt in front of me. I avoided the glass panels of the game booths. I skirted a wide puddle, my heart racing. I was afraid of myself. The path, of course, led me toward the funhouse. Its garish, grinning clown face loomed out of the fog. The walls were lined with those warped, distorting mirrors. I knew I had to walk past them. I kept my eyes fixed on the blank wall of a churro stand across the path and started walking. I could feel the mirrors to my left, feel my own image being stretched and squashed just a few feet away. And that's when I heard a soft whimper. It came from the funhouse, the sound of a child crying, lost and scared. "Mommy?" it sobbed. "I'm lost." My heart wrenched, every protective instinct I had fired up. There was a kid trapped in the park. All thought of the rules vanished. I had to help. I turned toward the sound, my flashlight sweeping across the front of the funhouse. "Hello," I called out. "I'm here to help. Where are you?" The crying stopped, and in the sudden silence, I realized my mistake. My flashlight beam was on the wall of mirrors, and I was staring right at my reflection. For one horrifying second, it was just me, a pale, terrified guy in a cheap security uniform. But then, the reflection's expression changed. While my face was a mask of fear, the face in the mirror slowly began to smile. A wide, predatory grin that my own face could never make. I was paralyzed. My reflection, my other self in the mirror, raised its hand and crooked its finger, beckoning me closer. And its eyes? They weren't my eyes. They were deep, pitch-black pits. A scream tore out of my throat. I stumbled backward, falling hard onto the asphalt, the impact finally breaking the spell. I scrambled away, crab-walking through the fog, my eyes fixed on anything but that mirror. I risked one last glance. My reflection was me again, its face a copy of my own terror, but I knew what I saw. Something was wearing my face. And it was angry I had looked away. Panic took over. Rule 2, never deviate from the path, was gone. I just ran, blindly. I sprinted through the fog, away from the funhouse, away from that grinning thing. I didn't know where I was going, I just ran, my lungs burning. I finally skidded to a halt, gasping for air, leaning against something hard and wooden. The fog was thinning here. I looked up to get my bearings, and my blood froze all over again. I was standing in front of the boarded-up entrance to the Tunnel of Love. A cold dread, worse than anything I'd felt before, washed over me. Rule 8. Do not even approach. I had run directly to it. The entrance was covered in thick planks nailed over a heart-shaped opening. A faded sign read, "Journey to the Heart of Romance." It looked like a tomb. I started to back away, slowly. This was the one place the rules explicitly forbade. I had to get away. And then I heard it. From inside the tunnel, the soft, metallic jingle of keys. It was the exact sound my set of keys made. Instinctively, I slapped my pocket. It was empty. The heavy ring of keys was gone. Silas's words echoed in my head. Don't lose the keys. My one job, besides surviving, was to have those keys for him. Did I drop them when I fell? Then, a new sound came from the tunnel. A woman's voice, soft and desperate. "Please," she whispered. "Please, Help me. He locked me in. He took my keys. It was a trap. It was a lure. My logical mind screamed it, but the voice sounded so real. And my keys? I needed those keys. I'm not going in, I whispered to myself, trying to rationalize it. I'll just look. Just a peek. My hands, acting on their own, reached for the edge of a loose, rotten board. I pulled. The nails groaned. I created a small gap, just wide enough to see through. I pressed my eye to the crack and aimed my flashlight into the darkness. The beam cut through the black, revealing a dark, water-filled channel and the back of a swan-shaped boat. The jingling stopped. The woman fell silent. For a moment, there was nothing. And then, deep within the tunnel, two small, red lights flickered on. They weren't lights. They were eyes. They stared at me from the dark. A low, wet growl rumbled from inside, a sound that vibrated through the wood into my skull. It wasn't human. It wasn't an animal. It was the sound of something ancient and hungry. I realized the horrible truth. The voice, the keys, it was all a mimic, a lure to make me open the door. I tried to pull back, but a splinter from the plank had snagged my jacket sleeve. I was stuck. The red eyes began to move toward me, picking up speed. With them came a wet, dragging, slithering sound. The growl rose to a horrifying shriek of rage. I ripped my arm back with all my might. My jacket tore, but I was free. I fell backward just as a long, pale, sickly white arm, too long, with too many joints, burst through the gap. It ended not in a hand, but in a cluster of long, yellowed talons that swiped violently at the air where my head had just been. I scrambled backward as a grotesque shape, a nightmare of mismatched limbs, tried to squeeze its way through the hole I had made, wood splintering under its strength. I hadn't entered the tunnel, but I had broken the spirit of the rule. I had opened the cage. There was no thought, only instinct, the animal need to survive. That glimpse of the pale, multi-jointed arm was more than enough. I turned and ran. I ran without direction, without caring about paths or rules. The whole park was just one big landscape of terror. Behind me, I heard a tremendous crash, the sound of splintering wood and a final, triumphant roar that echoed across the entire park. It was out. Whatever they decommissioned the Tunnel of Love for was now free. My lungs were on fire. I fumbled in my pockets, my mind clinging to one last idea: the office. And then my fingers brushed against cold metal in my other pocket. The keys. They were there. They had been there all along. The jingle from the tunnel was a lie, a perfect, cruel trick. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I burst onto the main midway, sprinting for the little shack that now represented the only salvation in the world. I could hear it behind me, the crash of a trash can, the high-pitched screech of metal being dragged. It was hunting. I reached the office, my fumbling hands barely able to work the lock. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and shot the deadbolt. The click of it sliding home was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I collapsed against the door, shaking uncontrollably. I waited. The monitor still showed static. I was blind, but I could hear a heavy thump against the outside wall. A long, scraping sound, like a talon dragging slowly along the thin wood of the shack. It was circling me, testing the cage. It knew I was in here. I huddled in the corner and made myself as small as possible. I stayed like that for hours, just listening to it have a destructive tantrum across the park. The sickening splinter of wood, the groan of stressed metal. Then slowly, the sounds began to die down. Through the grimy window, I saw the first faint, gray light of dawn. As the light grew, the horrible sounds faded to nothing. All that was left was the chirping of early morning birds, a true, peaceful silence. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when I heard a key in the office door. I flinched, tensing for another attack. The door opened, and there stood Silas, holding a cup of coffee. His gaze fell on me, huddled in the corner, a wreck. He looked past me, out at the carnival grounds. He took a long, slow sip of his coffee and sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Broke Rule 8, didn't you, son?" he said, his voice as flat as ever. "I can always tell. The air gets heavy." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Silas shook his head, not in anger, but in resignation. "Don't worry," he grunted. "It can't stand the daylight. The day crew will have its mess cleaned up before the gates open at 10. We're very efficient." He took another sip. "You can pick up your night's pay on the way out. I don't think this job is for you." He didn't have to tell me twice. I scrambled to my feet and walked out into the morning light, never looking back. As I walked toward the main gate, I could see the damage. A game booth smashed to splinters, a heavy park bench thrown clear across the midway. But just like Silas said, a small crew of silent, grim-faced workers was already emerging, beginning the repairs with a practiced, almost ritualistic efficiency. I walked through the gate and didn't stop. I didn't get my pay. I just walked. Behind me, I heard the cheerful, booming calliope music of the carousel startup, for real this time. The smell of fresh popcorn was already filling the air as the first families began to line up, ready for their day of magic. For them, it was a city of light and joy. But for me, the smell was no longer happy. It was the smell of dread. The music wasn't a call to fun, but a warning. I never went back to the carnival. I moved out of that town a few months later. I couldn't stand the thought of July rolling around again. But sometimes, even now, hundreds of miles away, sometimes in the dead of night, when the house is completely silent, I swear I can hear it. A faint, tinny, broken melody drifting on the wind. The sad, lonely music of a carousel, playing for an audience that isn't there.